hello. Welcome. I'm going to introduce you now. Let's see, your lighting looks good. You sounded good when you spoke a while ago. So,
Right.
okay.
Good, good. Yeah, we've
All
done
right.
this before, so hopefully it'll work again. So,
With that, well, I'm Rebecca Allen, an
right.
MC for Climate Healers, and I'm going to introduce Jan Liband, who is a fact-based environmentalist, public speaker, Silicon Valley veteran, and he's studied environmental and health aspects of global food systems for decades.
Mhm.
He works with plant-based advocates, and his talk is Rebalancing Earth's Systems via Sustainable Agriculture. Welcome, Jan.
Thank you very much for the introduction there. Look forward to sharing some good information with all of you who've decided to join us today live, or if you're catching this on replay later on a recording, that's good as well. So I should share out my screen. I got a few visuals to go along here. So let me do that. I will share. Let's see here. I will share the whole desktop and I'll go PowerPoint and there. So are you all with me? Is it,
Yes, that looks
you got the
great.
whole screen right there?
You bet, it looks beautiful.
Okay, great. Just wanted to make sure you can all see that here. So again, hello everyone. Again, my name's Jan Liband. I'm reaching you today from beautiful Northern California. And topic is going to be, rebalancing Earth's systems via sustainable agriculture. So we're going to talk a bit about what those systems are, and a bit about what sustainable agriculture is and is not. Here as part of VCOP-20. One of the organizations I volunteer with here in the area is Plant-Based Advocates. That's a Bay Area-based nonprofit organization that's really working on grassroots action and a lot of other community things to really accelerate the global shift to a more sustainable plant-based food system. So let's go ahead and get started here. One of the things I should say, though, is that this is not going to be a technical scientific deep dive. If you are one of the climate scientists and other environmental food system specialists tuning in, you'll know some of this information already. And if you've been sitting on some of these other wonderful sessions earlier today and joining some tomorrow, you're also getting more informed. And what I want to do here today is kind of take a lot of the information. There's going to be a lot of charts, there's going to be some graphs and some pictures, but it's to really kind of tell a story and really try to help simplify and clarify and help you understand what's going on with all these big systems in the agriculture. So it's taking a big complex thing and trying to make it a lot clearer and more understandable for you. I'm trying to go page down here so I can join. There we go. So Earth, our home. It's planet A, and we don't really have a planet B, as you know. And this one is just beautiful for those of you who live on it, and I think you all do. Wonderful place. As you see, it's mostly water. There's beautiful land, there's animals, there's creatures everywhere, plants. It's just an amazing place. And we have to take care of it, as best we can. And the Earth is a complex system of many different systems and regarding the atmosphere, what's going on in the atmosphere, the hydrosphere and all the waters, the geosphere, what's happening on the land, and also the biosphere, all the living matter, the plants and animals and everything on it. So if we kind of look at this information and we go, okay, where's life? Where's all the energy for all this coming from? It's coming from the sun, right? We got solar radiation up here coming in from the sun, coming through the atmosphere. Coming through the atmosphere, warming the land, warming the oceans, and providing the necessary energy for plants and animals to survive. All the energy that we get in terms of our food comes from the sun via plants and currently through animals too, which is something we'll be talking about. And so there's many complex systems going on though between the cryosphere as well, the landlocked areas, various ecosystems, cloud formation, what's going on up there. The atmospheric composition is changing up there, regarding climate change and all that. But the important point to remember is there's the stability and resilience of Earth's system, what provides us a stable climate and food and the natural world and which that sustains us, all depends on a complex set of interactions between all these different systems and operating in a certain way that they're in balance with one another. And when they're out of balance, that's what creates problems. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today in terms of rebalancing Earth systems. So let's get a little more into the Earth systems part. So first, I'm going to start with planetary boundaries. This is some wonderful work done out of the Stockholm Resilience Center. And they came up several years ago with this planetary boundaries concept, which is kind of a health check for planet Earth. But what's interesting is there's a lot of fires going on around the world, and climate change gets all the attention and it's in all the media. It's a big focus for climate healers, for this conference, for a lot of people. A lot of us have great concerns here and wonder what we can do. But there's many other problems beyond just climate change and what we're doing to the atmosphere and how it's impacting us in terms of other biological, geological, physiological systems. And so what they've done at the Stockholm Research Center, led by Professor Johan Rockström, is they've taken the Earth systems, broken down into 9 distinct areas. And for each of these areas, so you see climate change at the top, but then these other areas that are really kind of critical systems, they've defined what's called a safe operating space, right? So, the Earth is huge. It's enormous. And she gives us so much, but we can only take so much from her. She is still finite. She's still just one planet, only so much land, only so much water there. And so we can only take so much from her. We can only pollute her or alter her in so many ways without going out of the safe operating space. So we can do some things like, if there are only a couple million people on Earth, around 8 billion, boy, we could be burning fires all day and doing all kinds of things. But when we have 8 billion people, we have to do things a little differently. And so what they've done is they've then, they've then looked at, okay, where do we stand against all these planetary boundaries? And I'll do a quick walk around through these and relate it to the Earth system boundaries shortly. So let's just talk at the top. We'll go from the 1 o'clock position, novel entities. What the hell's that? Well, we are way out of the safe operating space on that. That is chemical pollution. This is the chemicals we're putting in the atmosphere out into the environment in terms of microplastics, forever chemicals, PFAS, those sorts of things, chemical pollutions of all kinds. Largely and mostly from the agriculture sector, but also from textile industry is a huge polluter, manufacturing industry, and others. But basically, think of anything that's human-made that's not natural going into the atmosphere, and it's a very high risk. We're way out of the operating space, and a lot of these are also endocrine disruptors. Things that cause birth defects and abnormalities of all kinds. Those are out there and they're impacting us already. If we go to the 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock position, we are still in the safe zone there with the ozone hole. I know it opened up, we managed to close it up, but we did find there's more things causing the ozone hole to increase again, so we have to watch that. Atmospheric aerosol loading has to do with the pollution that's going up into the air when we burn coal, wood, other particulate matters going into the air that blocks some of the sunlight coming in and generally form pollution and smog and other things. Ocean acidification, we're still in the safe zone there, but as long as we're pumping tons, way more carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, the ocean is forced to absorb a lot of these. It absorbs them anyway, but it's starting to acidify the ocean, making it less habitable for the life that lives there. The biogeochemical flows down there at 6 o'clock. We're way out of the safe operating space there. This has to do with all the nitrogen, all the phosphorus that we're using in agriculture, and primarily in animal agriculture, that we're just dumping on the fields. It's running off the fields. It's polluting the waterways, creating algal blooms, the dead zones in the oceans. A lot of problems. That has to be pulled way back. Fresh water. We're using way more water than natural replenishment rates are into the groundwater and what's available on the surface water. And this is being compounded terribly by climate change, because as the atmosphere warms up, for those of you in basic physics, when the atmosphere warms up, it holds more moisture. If the atmosphere holds more moisture, there's less water on the ground and more up in the air. And we get more intense storms from all that energy and that excess moisture. And it really changes the climate balance. Land system change. This is primarily, we've been cutting down our forests since the agricultural revolution 10,000 years ago. We've been burning them down, cutting them down for burning for firewood, for building, but mostly for agriculture, and increasingly for animal agriculture, to make room for pasture lands, croplands, etc., way beyond the safe space there. And because we've changed so much land, up here now there, we've taken away the habitat. And the biosphere integrity is severely damaged. There's a lot, the species extinction, we're losing what, 100 species, per day by estimate now, and the functional biodiversity in terms of how things relate is severely in peril, and the genetic biodiversity in terms of the variety of species and the health of the species are not in good shape. And then finally, there's climate change, which was a big topic, obviously. The concentrations in the air and the amount of radiative forcing that's coming back on Earth and heating it up is beyond the safe operating space at this point. So what's a little troubling, but again, we're going to talk some truths here today, is the leading cause of almost all these major problems with our environment, not just our atmosphere and our climate, but our environment, the biosphere, our whole ecology, is agriculture. It's primarily, with the novel entities, think of just the huge volumes of pesticides and herbicides, insecticides. We're just dumping on the land, going out there. It's terrible. And then we have to invent all these medicines to treat all the sick people and all the problems those have. Of course, fossil fuels, textile industry, et cetera, also manufacturing also contributes to these novel, unnatural entities, chemicals going into the environment. The biogeochemical flows down here at the 6 o'clock, again, nitrogen, phosphorus. It's from the GMO monocropping we do to grow corn and soy by the masses to feed all the animals. We're using the bulk of our freshwater resources that, we need water to grow crops. I mean, even 70% of the world's crops are grown by rainwater, which is becoming less dependable with the climate change and with more moisture staying in the atmosphere. But we're using a ton of it to grow crops than to feed animals, rather than to grow crops and eat the crops there. Obviously, we as more people eat meat, we're clearing more land, all that deforestation, all the carbon from those trees getting burned, going up in the atmosphere, and then again, biosphere integrity. Again, agriculture is the leading cause, and particularly animal agriculture specifically, is the leading resource hog and damage to the environment. Now, fossil fuels also play a role in that, but I do encourage you to stick around after my presentation today, or if you're catching this on a recording, be sure to check the renowned scientist, Gerard Wedderburn Bishop, is going to be presenting some of the latest evidence and research showing that the animal agriculture sector is the leading cause of climate change, even greater than fossil fuels, with some very compelling new data and some new techniques. So I encourage you to stick around for that. So let's see. So back to Earth, right? So look, so our planetary health check, not looking good, right? We've put on the sensors, we looked at things, whoa, we're way beyond the safe operating zone on many fronts, many critical systems. And if the planet doesn't work, we're not going to be able to live on it, right? These systems have to be healthy. We need healthy forests, healthy oceans. We need healthy landscapes, biodiversity. We need all of that. And they're really in peril. And I really also touched by this other one I'll read, by Mayor Eric Adams, New York City, who says, I always say we've got two mothers, one who birthed us and the other one who sustains us. And we're killing the one who sustains us with the food we consume, and it's like, wow. I mean, we have to eat. I love food. I know all of you who are listening here right now, you love food, but the what we're eating, how we're producing it is really destroying our environment, and that has to change, and we are all part of it, making that change. So we talked a moment about the planetary boundaries framework. And so what they've done with that framework, which is kind of the planetary health check, looking at all these different systems, where we are in the safe zone, and he said, okay, let's start thinking more about, let's take these kind of all these, let's connect all these environmental issues here and connect that with social issues. Like, how do people get food? Can they get enough food? Are they going to lose their land to rising sea levels? What else going on? And really consider humans and other living beings' needs and impacts. So they've taken the planetary boundaries framework and combined it with other frameworks that examine the environment, the climate, and so forth, and have come up with the Safe and Just Earth System Boundaries framework, which is now being championed by the Earth Commission at this point. And so again, where do we stand? So a safe boundary is saying, we cover that prior, which is that what we got to keep these various planetary systems, these various things within safe boundaries to ensure a stable and resilient Earth system. And we want it to be just. We want it to be fair, right? So we want to minimize human and nature's exposure to harm from these different systems, whether it's, storms, heat, lack of rain, pollution, whatever it is, so that all of us, all 8 billion humans and growing, can have a dignified life and, be free from poverty. And this real issue here is that once you go beyond the safe zone, and you'll see these dots, those black dots, unfortunately, are current things in all these different areas. We are well beyond the safe zone. And when you go beyond the safe zone, at some point, and it's low, the science here is very complex, but we can hit tipping points, irreversible tipping points that can irreversibly shift how these systems can support life on Earth, and can go from supporting life to undermining life. And so these things are way out of balance. If you others remember that movie way back in, I think it was the 1970s, called Koyaanisqatsi, which is a Native American word for, I think it's a Hopi word for life out of balance, crazy life. And that's what we're doing. We're consuming endlessly. We're polluting. We're doing things, and most people don't even know it. I mean, we're aware of the tailpipe exhaust and things like that, but we don't even know what we're doing with our food. Most people don't. Now, one of the beautiful things about this, the Earth system boundaries, to close on this, and I'll return to it, is instead of just going, here's the planetary health check, and here's the status of everything, by considering the human factors and also non-human animal factors and everything, they now provide actionable science-based targets that the government and companies can use to help pull these things back into the safe operating zone, into healthier space. And I'd really encourage you guys to learn more. I have a link to some resources at the end. But just want to ground you with the planetary boundaries, how this morphed into Earth system boundaries, and how these things are kind of way beyond the safe zone. And we've got to do things, and we've got to do them quickly in order to restore the balance there. And the good news is agriculture plays a huge role. You play a huge role. All of us do. But what is the problem? So is the problem that we have 8 billion people on Earth? Kind of, but that's not it. That's not all of it. It's really an overconsumption problem. right? It's not that just that we, we all live, we all need energy, we all need food, we need clothing, housing, shelter, some transportation means, things like this, some stuff. Um, but we have too much of it. And when it comes to our food, we're consuming way too much food, way too many animal products and everything than our precious earth can sustain. And in particular, this is not so much in the global south. This problem is not so much in Asia and the developing world. Overconsumption problem is primarily folks like you and me here in the United States and Western Europe and elsewhere in the developed world. We are consuming way more than our share of resources. And particularly, we eat so much meat. We eat so much dairy products, so many of these things. And so in the rest of the world, it's very, very small amounts by comparison. There are a few countries, Portugal and others that are also heavy meat consumers, but they're in the developed world, in Portugal. So it's an overconsumption problem, and it's being fed by a totally inefficient and unsustainable food system here. And I've got to bring up the issue of food waste. Even if everyone went vegan tomorrow and Yahoo and there, if we still keep throwing away 30 to 40% of all the food we produce, including the animal foods that are produced today, just end up in the trash. Uh, just them go to landfills, just turn into yet more methane. It's a horrible waste where it's a terrible problem, and that's something again we can look at all. It's not just you as a consumer, but all along the supply chain, from what rots in the field to what dies in transit, perishable goods, all and what gets thrown away at restaurants and industrial settings, or what goes bad in your fridge and you throw away. So the food waste is a huge issue. So let's see. Okay, so how is it trending? What is all this meat production here? So, wow, it's gone way up over the last 60 years. Meat consumption, it's hundreds of millions of tons of meat. It's going way, way up. And it's gone up in Asia the most because that's where the greatest population growth has been occurring, obviously in China, India, Indonesia, etc. But as the income levels and the prosperity levels have improved in those areas, more people can afford meat and prefer meat. And so we see a problem where they went from being low consumers per meat per capita, with a quarter of the people in India being vegetarian, or vegan still, but a lot of the other people increasing meat consumption because, humans have been taught to like meat. And when you're taught to like it, you learn to like it and you keep eating it, not even knowing the impact that it has on the environment there. So huge, huge growth in meat production. Now, if we look at the oceans, right, what are we doing in the oceans? Right there. So this is looking again, is back to 1950 to near the present, is that how much are we capturing in wild fish, just pulling life out of the ocean? It's grown tremendously, from the last, 70 years, it's almost quadrupled, but it's kind of flattened out because we've moved to now farming fish, aquaculture as a new way of producing, fish and protein for human consumption and also for other consumption for pet food and things like that. But this has had huge, huge impact on the ocean. And again, you think of the Earth, our beautiful sphere, it's mostly water. It's mostly blue there. And what we're doing with the oceans, and I'll come back to the land in just a moment, is the amount of wildlife we are pulling from the oceans. It's mind-boggling. 25,000 to 75,000 fish per second that are just getting hauled out of the ocean. 40% of those aren't even the target species. They're not even the type of fish they're trying to catch. And so those unwanted fish are thrown back. Many of them are killed in the nets or suffocate or they're injured. You think of these shark fins, soon they hack the fins off the sharks, chuck them back in the water. They don't do well. Okay. It's awful there. And so we're just pulling so much life out of the ocean. It's staggering. It's unsustainable. And over a third of all the wild caught fish that we're pulling out of the ocean, we're then feeding to other farmed animals, including farmed fish. I mean, it's a bit of insanity here. And over 90% of the fish populations out there are fully exploited, overexploited, and depleted. I mean, many of the experts studying these things even more deeply and intensely than I estimate that we're going to see some pretty wide scale fisheries and ecological collapse within the oceans in about 25 years. They're saying 2048. It's hard to tell exactly what year it's going to happen, but we're pulling so much life. It's damaging the balance, damaging the ecosystem of all the creatures, that are living in there. And if you look briefly at aquaculture, which is growing tremendously in popularity, basically these are just factory farms. These are CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations just put out at sea, or in some cases in some holding ponds, like where we grow a lot of the prawns and so forth. And they have the same environmental impacts and problems that the CAFOs and factory farms have on land. It just happens in the water. And so we're dumping chemicals and things to treat all the diseases and the sea lice and everything on the fish. We're introducing special fish into the thing. We have salmon that grow 2 to 3 times faster, GMO salmon. And when they escape into the wild, that totally alters the balance of the other fish there. All the diseases spread out from these fish cages, and all their sewage and all their uneaten food goes to the floor of the ocean, or the fjord, or the where these fish are kept, and emit methane and pollute it. Hardly anything can live there. So aquaculture is being held up, oh, it's a thing, let's stop catching so much wild fish. It has tremendous environmental. You're just taking there and concentrating it, putting in all these polluting inputs and wrecking stuff. Not a solution. Let's go back to land. Okay. So we looked again. There's our beautiful Earth there again. I like to bring the Earth into several of these the visuals here to help you keep it all in context. But Earth's surface is mostly oceans and water, but about a third of it, 29%, is land. Of that land, some of it's covered by glaciers or just barren deserts and land, but about 71%, of the land is habitable. About half of that land is used for agriculture, right? And then of the land where we're using to grow and produce our food, we're using the vast majority of it, 77%. I saw statistics this morning and others saying 83% now, but let's figure, 4/5 of all the available habitable arable agricultural land is not being used to feed us. It's being used to feed animals who then we eat. It's like, wait a sec, but we need to eat. And we've got like 1 billion people who are near starving, total food insecurity in the world. And we're using just a fraction of our land to actually grow crops for people. And using all that land, all the water that's used to, raise all those animals, and they only provide a fraction of our calorie supply. You can just see the inefficiency. All this land and water, just a fraction of the global calorie supply, and just a third of the protein supply. Folks, it doesn't make sense. We have 8 billion people. We all need to eat. We only have so much land. We only have so much fresh water to crop. This doesn't make sense. So why is it so inefficient? Like, I don't know if you've ever wondered that. So let's look at this again. You guys have probably seen these statistics. I'm not sure if it was called up in one of the earlier presentations. I saw a few of them, but not all. But the biomass, if you take all the land mammals, so let's forget about the reptiles and the birds for a moment, just all the land, every animal there is, it's a mammal, all the giraffes and squirrels and raccoons and people and pets and everything, they're there on the world. Okay, about a third of all the mammals on Earth are the humans. That's us. We got 8 billion of us. We weigh a lot. But like almost twice that is just the livestock. And these are, in many cases, big, heavy, fast-growing animals. You think of, the pigs and the sheep and the goats and the cows, that are being fattened up in a period of months and everything. They eat a lot. They're hungry. And what happened is we've used all that land we've taken in, and to feed all those animals, all that livestock, there's very little land now for the wild animals. This still exists. Only 4% of the wild animals make up the biomass of the earth. It's just a teeny bit. It's basically humans and all the animals we're raising for food. It's strange. And so Why is it so darn inefficient? So for those of you who remember your biology class and think of the trophic laws and everything, the trophic laws kind of look at, how food energy moves up through the food chain, right? So all food energy comes from the sun. And it's created in this miracle process by plants called photosynthesis, right? So it takes the energy from the sun through photosynthesis, produces energy, life, and everything. And then that's consumed. Those plants are consumed by primary consumers, with all the herbivores, insects, and many birds of the world. And then there are predators that are called secondary consumers that eat those animals. And then there's tertiary consumers, kind of more the apex predators that then eat those animals. But every time you go up a level, in the trophic levels in the food web, you lose like 90% of the food energy, right? Because it gets lost to heat and movement of the animal and growing its bones and things like this, things that's not even edible food, for us as humans. And so all the energy from the sun is stored in all the plants and goes up in the animals. And the further we eat up the food chain, the more land, the more energy, the more plants is required. And so it's just a really strange way of doing it. So if we look at how this plays out in terms of conversion inefficiencies, right? So we take all this land. So there are pasture-raised animals, and we'll talk about that in a little bit there. But we talk about the ones that are, in feedlots are fed mostly corn and soy and fish meal and all these other things. But we feed this to a cow. 25 units of protein going to a cow, you get 1 unit of protein out. Whoa, we just lost 24 units of protein that was right there in the plants. Not smart. Pigs are a little bit more efficient if they're feeding there, 10 units of protein, 1 out. Chicken are more efficient still, about 4.5 units of protein in, 1 unit of protein out. But again, we're losing all that protein and we're using all that land and all those plants by feeding them to animals and then losing it up as it goes up the food chain. I don't have fish on here, but fish are kind of similar to chicken. It's about a 5-to-1 ratio. So we have all these farmed fish in these big cages out there in aquaculture, and then we have to feed them other fish meal, and we can feed them soy and stuff that they don't eat normally, bathe them in chemicals and things like that to try to keep them healthy and antibiotics. And it gets a little bit of fish out the backside. It's not smart, people. So let's take a breath. So it's a lot of bad news, right? And I think about this stuff every day. Unfortunately, I research it every day. I go out and speak in public settings about it, and it's hard not to feel real down about it and about a lot of things going on, throughout the world. It's I get it. I get it. But there's some good news, and that's that there is a chance there's a possibility we can rebalance Earth systems. We can restore nature. We can slow, potentially even reverse global warming and some of the worst effects of climate change through sustainable agriculture. So there's some bright spots here. So let's take a look at that. All right. So first off, if we're going to rebalance Earth systems and all these areas where we're outside of the safe operating space in Earth's boundaries, let's take a quick look at what is sustainable agriculture? What are the key characteristics of sustainable agriculture? So what are these? So first off, well, we got people. We got lots of them. We got 8 billion and growing, forecast to maybe hit about 10 billion people by 2050. With the declining birth rates these days in the developed world, maybe we won't quite get there, and that's a good thing for the Earth, quite frankly. But we have a lot of people to feed, and if you think, wow, if everyone could get 3 meals a day, that's 8 billion times 3. That's 24 billion meals a day we got to prepare. And we need to do that. If it's to be sustainable, we can't keep cutting down more forests to grow more corn and soy and alfalfa to feed cows and cows and dairy cows or graze other animals. We need those forests to stand. We need them to provide habitat for the land for the creatures, that live out there, and stop taking all the carbon that's sequestered in those forests and in those grasslands and burning it up and sending it in the sky. So we have to adequately feed 8 to 10 people. Sustainable agriculture has to use far less land and far less fresh water. We don't have as much fresh water we used to because we've warmed up the atmosphere, and more of the water is now stuck up there, and we need it down here. There, we need to really now restore the ecosystem and the environment, all the biological health that we have just been devastating over the last, several thousand years, but in the last couple hundred years, really, as our population has exploded and our taste for meat has exploded, we've got to reverse that trend and move to sustainable ways of growing food and feeding our population. And we need to protect the soil. We have huge swaths of the earth right now that where the soil is now not only degraded, but it's desertification. It can't even hold moisture anymore. The topsoil is blowing away. We can't have that. We have to look at restorative, regenerative practices rather than these intense monocropping and pounding it with inputs and pesticides and fertilizers and all the runoff and problems from that. We have to take care of the soil. The soil is the earth, and the earth is what feeds us. We need to protect the oceans and all the waterways there. Sustainable agriculture is one that would protect the oceans, both by not emitting so many greenhouse gases that were there causing increased acidification, but also by having less nitrogen, phosphorus runoff from all the fertilizers going out in the oceans and creating the algal blooms and the dead zones and everything. And we've got to stop pulling so much life, extracting so much life right out of the ocean there. And finally, it has to be economically viable, right? If it's just to be sustainable, it has to be a way of growing food and feeding people that's where it can be sustained, and that businesses can exist, industries can exist, and that it works. So how would that look? Well, again, spoiler alert. And if you're on today's session, you're listening to all these other ones, you probably already got the idea here that the way we do this is by reducing the amount of animals we consume. It's not complicated, folks. It's really not. Like, if our current global diet requires all this cropland to produce all this animal feed, all this pasture land, we've got to cut back. Ideally to zero, but let's at least start cutting back. And if you look at these, I'm not going to go through them in total detail here, but if you just cut out the most resource-intensive animal products, such as beef, I say cows or sheep. I don't like saying, beef or mutton. Come on, these are cows, these are sheep, these are animals. There's not. That does a huge amount, saves a lot of land, and that land now can be rewilded. That land can be reforested. The wildlife can return. If you cut out dairy on top of that, huge win. And luckily 70% of the world is already lactose intolerant, which means lactose normal, right? 70% of the world means you're on the normal side. But for those 30% who still insist on having milk after childhood, that's a really costly thing in the environment. Pull that back and we save even more land and reduce pollution even further. If you cut out all meat and everything, full vegetarian, we save more land. If you go vegan, wow, now we're using only a fraction of the land, a fraction of the freshwater resources that we used to, and that we are doing now. And we're on a path right now to clear more forests, clear more land, so more people can eat more meat. Again, insanity, right? So what does that mean here for us in the US? I know some of you may be tuning in internationally, but for those of us here in the United States or the developed world, the thing to do is make sustainable food choices, right? How do we get to a sustainable agriculture system? Is, we can sit around and wait for government to do things. It's not going to happen too quick, and industry's too busy making money and enjoying those subsidies. We've got to change. Okay, so in the US, even just for the aspects of climate change and global warming, and avoid like the worst effects of it, and to keep it under 2 degrees Celsius, US citizens and really those in the other heavy meat countries, you got to pull way back. You got to reduce your beef consumption by 90%, 90% less pork, a lot less milk, ideally zero, many fewer eggs, and just eat a lot more beans and pulses and other good healthy sources of protein there. And all this comes from Marco Springman, wrote excellent detailed reports on this out of Oxford University. You know, going full vegan is hard for some people. It might take some time. Could be other factors involved. There is. I mean, we're human. We're used to eating certain things, certain habits, certain rituals, traditions. There's places in the world where they don't have a choice. The food distribution system isn't there, or you're in the far north Arctic, or you're in a desert region. You don't have a grocery store nearby, and you live in a remote island. Maybe you can't grow crops, and you might have to, grab some fish from the nearby ocean. But most of us have a choice. Most of us in the developed world and the other world, we have a choice of what we're eating. And we're not asking, say, hey, go starve and eat a bunch of boring beans and stuff. There's really good, sustainable food choices, out there that you can dive into. But it's, again, you've got to cut. To be sustainable, you have to cut way back. So, so what happens if we free up all that pasture land? If we free up all these croplands that are currently used to feed animals and not us, then those areas, those parts of nature can rewild. And it can be done in really two ways. I mean, if you look on the left here, this is in the Scottish, this is in Scotland. Many of you have seen this before. It's over just a few period of years. You see those little white dots there on the left? Those are sheep. And they're grazing all over that area. And they're eating all the plants down, all the tree shoots that are barely coming up. They're eating them down. There's no trees. There's nothing going on. You remove the animals from the land. Nature's beautiful. Nature rebounds. Trees come back. Grasses come back. Animals go in. It's amazing. And this can be accelerated with us. There's just rewilding where you just let it happen naturally. Remove the animals. Let nature just work its magic. Or there's assisted rewilding where we can plant trees. We can plant bushes. We can plant other greenery, other flora that can then flourish and kind of reconstitute the ecosystem. But for the most part, if you just leave the land alone, if there were trees there before, they will come back. If there weren't there, maybe there was a reason weren't there, and maybe it was a grassland or a prairie. You don't necessarily try to grow trees there. There's not adequate rainfall. So you got to be a little smart with assisted rewilding. But the beauty of this, right, is what do you see here? Right? What do you see here? I see a forest, and it's beautiful, and I love hiking. This looks like the area right outside where I live. I'm very, very fortunate here. What you're seeing here is atmospheric carbon in solid form. Trees, plants, mycelium, all the things, these are all forms. These are carbon-based life forms. These store carbon. This is where it has been stored, except we've cut so much of it down and blew it up in the atmosphere, use that land to feed animals. It's not smart, but this stores carbon. This is where it is. We don't need fancy, direct air capture, carbon capture machines, fire them up to suck carbon out of the air. We got something that already does that and does it pretty damn well, naturally. And what's beautiful about forests and rewilding and letting grasslands rebound and forests rebound is it's not just atmospheric carbon that's stored, life returns. The animals come back, biodiversity increases, water now doesn't just run off the land, and things like that. It's stored in the soil. I just saw a beautiful film just last weekend. I just got to throw it out there. I was on YouTube. And there's one 16-minute documentary called Forest Man. I highly recommend it. There's a single guy in India, northeastern India, lives on the world's largest river island. It was just barren. It was desertified. Everything been stripped clear of it. And he, since the 1970s, has been planting trees and bushes out in this area. He has now created a forest larger than Central Park. It's like 540 hectares in size. One man. And the beautiful thing is, and you'll see this in the documentary, when the forest came back, that he's just creating, and it's assisted rewilding, there's elephants coming in, there's hippopotamus coming in, birds coming in. It used to just be dirt, sandy stuff, there. Oh, it's beautiful. Unfortunately, with climate change and rising sea levels, that river island is threatened. And the increasing storms and big floods that happen are eroding the soils much faster than they have anticipated. So I'm rooting for them and we got to help them. But do see Forest Man on YouTube. Wonderful. So again, if we rewild, we bring the animals back. Uh, we can store carbon. We can draw it down from the atmosphere there, and we need to do this badly. So again, if we go back to the safe and just Earth system boundaries, if we take animals out of our food system, if we shift to this as quickly as practically possible, like this, we can rebalance Earth systems. Yes, we also need to work on fossil fuels. We do have to get off them, but it's going to take decades and decades to get, all to find all the other energy sources, to create the new infrastructure, all the transmission lines to get the electricity from the solar or renewable or wind places to where the energy is needed there. And we're going to have to make a lot of batteries, so, and that's going to require a lot of mining and all this. So we have to deal with the fossil fuels issue, but it's going to take decades and decades to do that. But meanwhile, the biggest issue with climate change and with environmental and ecological destruction overall in all our critical Earth system boundaries, of the Earth system processes that sustain us, that's agriculture. That's driven by our food choices. That's driven by government incentives and subsidies that encourage polluting, environmentally destructive animal agricultural practices, which we should just not be doing. It should just not be doing, again, if we were smart. And we need to move towards these safe and just boundaries. And again, we can start now. And I was trying to say, we're not waiting for new energy bills and new climate this or new infrastructure for energies to get off fossil fuels. You can just start changing your eating habits. It's not asking for much, right? It's just, less of the stuff that harms you, more of the stuff that's healthy and sustainable there. And the more you pull back and the more healthier, more sustainable food you eat, you're going to feel a heck of a lot better. I do. I've been doing it since the 1980s, and no meat, no dairy, anything since the 1980s. And and I'm healthy as a horse. And the reason people say that is because horses are also vegan and they're really damn healthy. So I got a couple points also to make, and then I'm going to open up to a few questions. I want to take a couple things. Regenerative agriculture. There's a lot of talk about this, a lot of greenwashing going on a lot around this. So basically it's a huge topic. It's not really well-defined, well understood, but it's well-intentioned, it's good. But it's basically encouraging farming practices that focus on soil health, and in particular, regenerating the health of soils that have been depleted and degraded by using crop rotation. So you're not just growing the same crop in that piece of land, using different crops and maybe putting soy in there, which puts nitrogen in the soil. Doing cover cropping, so after the harvest, you don't just leave the fields fallow. You can grow more crops there, sequester more carbon, keep water runoff to a minimum, all that, and you don't till the land. Very little tilling or no tilling, because that disturbs all the mycelium, all the microbial growth in the soil, releases all that carbon, and just dries out the land. And it's terrible. But so regenerative agriculture for growing crops, for food, for people, 2 thumbs up, and make it organic as well. I don't know. If I had a third thumb, I'd do it. Regenerative agriculture, on the other hand, for farming animals is not smart. It is not scalable, and there's a huge buzz about it. Don't believe the hogwash or stuff. But if you're going to take regenerative agriculture, I'm going to now graze my animals on land. It's actually just regenerative. It's just grazing. They call it regenerative grazing. It's just grazing, people. You're just putting animals on the land. You're just going to move them around to more land so they don't just eat down and degrade the land too much. So you're going to move them to more areas. It requires even more land. And since the animals grow slower, eating normal pasture versus being full of soy on a feedlot, they emit more methane and they live longer. And so the carbon sequestration that may happen by having more forage still in the ground and there is not nearly enough to offset all the greater methane emissions or the fact that you needed more land to do it. So can you feed everyone in the world with regenerative agriculture, trying to farm animals? No, you can feed a few elites. And that is about all on that. So we could talk about endlessly, don't have the time. One other couple things, and then I'll wrap up. You hear a lot about alternative proteins or alt proteins. It's a very promising area. Basically, it's generally meant to mean, these are more sustainable ways of making meats and cheeses without an animal. You can make a plant-based. You guys are familiar with the plant-based burgers and other plant-based cheeses and things that are out there. But we have new methods coming up that are cultivated, the lab grown, as they're saying, going in the fermenters and the bioreactors, and also the fermentation ones where you can use mushrooms or other forms of mycelium, to produce meats. All these have these all have real solid benefits in terms of reducing the amount of land and water required to produce food, to produce, protein dense foods. However, they say that less water, less pollution, thumbs up. However, they do require a lot of energy, particularly the cultivated things. And you got to build all these steel tanks. You got to have energy to operate them. And if that energy sources are not renewable energy, you're still emitting a ton of carbon powering those things. Now, they're still more efficient than putting all that stuff through an animal, but it's not ideal. And in fact, for hundreds of thousands of years, humans have eaten plenty of food without waiting for the next Impossible Burger or Beyond Burger to save the day or some cultivated thing. Protein is in all foods, all plant foods. You don't need special burgers. You can make chili. You can have pasta. You can make all these wonderful things you're not waiting on any special alt protein to do it. And they're certainly healthier for humans. So what can you do? You hear all this stuff, the bad news, but there's also the good news, right? It's just you can shift off it. So first off, I mean, if you're not already looking at your own eating habits and the impact that you have on the world, start learning more. Really start working on reducing and ideally eliminate all your meat and dairy consumption. Including fish. We got to leave them in the ocean. The oceans need a chance to rebound. You've got to reduce your food waste. If you're going to order it at the restaurant, take it from the buffet table, buy it at the grocery store, eat it. Or if you have a pet, give it something to them. Don't let it go to waste. Be smart about your food. 30 to 40% of all the food that we grow and raise through animals is wasted. We've got to cut that way back. Explore new foods, enjoy it and learning about new stuff, how to cook. When I first said, I'm not going to eat all this meat and dairy, which I ate tons of, growing up, it's like, oh, what do I eat instead? It's like, you got to explore new things. And there's so many, the whole world opens up to you, seasonings, spices, food types. It's just great. And you really got to encourage others to do the same. And I don't mean, sit there and bash people on the head and try to convert everyone to vegan. It's more, show them how wonderful it is. Show them what great food it is. Your friends, your family, your community, and others, I mean, politicians and our industry, demand that you go to your local restaurant. I want more plant-based options. I want more things here. We all have a role in this, to make this better. So in terms of resources here, and we'll wrap up, Stockholm Resilience Center really came up with the planetary boundaries concept and ultimately worked on that with the Earth system boundaries, which is now being carried on by the Earth Commission, a multidisciplinary research and scientist institute, looking at how we can do this and set actionable targets for cities and industries and businesses there to improve there. Obviously, come to Climate Healers, Silas Rao's site, many good resources there. If you're a data geek like myself, hit up plantbaseddata.org. They got wonderful organization of almost anything you want to see, Google Drives full of documents and everything, fantastic graphics, anything you want to know, fish, land and all that, wonderful resource if you like geeking out on the data. And I'm going to put in a big plug for personally think is the best documentary about our food system and the environment, which is Eating Our Way to Extinction. Came out just a few years ago, won a bazillion awards, but a lot of people don't know about it. But it's been posted to YouTube. It's available in over 20 different languages and really hits hard and helps you understand visually what our food system is doing to the environment and how it's impacting indigenous people. So really encourage you to see that as well. So again, wrapping up, there is no Planet B. I know we want to rewild Planet B as the theme of this conference, but just by changing our habits, encouraging others, doing what we can really work on rewilding and bringing back life and healthy oceans, healthy planet. Let's do it. We can do it. So that's the formal part. And I say, oh, we're near the end of the time. I could take a couple questions. The MC is Rebecca. What do I do here? What would you like?
Yes, hello. Let's see. You could, let's see, stop your share screen.
Okay.
And I will, we have two questions, at least two, and I'm going to bring up, if David will come turn on his camera, then he can come on and ask a question. It's also possible for somebody else to stop your share screen.
Okay.
And
let me see here. So I'll go to, let's see here. Stop share. Boom. It's going. Okay.
Okay, very good. Okay, and so let's see. We'll have David, if you can unmute, they'll put you in the, there you are. You can now. I think they've fixed it where you can now.
Can you unmute now?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, Jan, great job. And every time I see this data, it just gets more and more compelling. But my question to you is, in an era where there's false data, fake news, and a lot of skepticism around data, I mean, how do you get people to actually believe what it is that you're telling us? What are some of the challenges that you have?
Right. Dave, I mean, you're hitting on a really key part in that, the information universe is no longer controlled by traditional media or what we used to think of it, right? And now with the access to the internet, also with social media, podcast influence, people choose their information. They choose their information bubble. And unfortunately, industry, the meat industry and the dairy industry and the fast food industry and junk food industry, they are paying these people to put out false narratives. They're putting out information to talk about regenerative grazing, and how that's going to save the world, and a little bit of seaweed to cows is going to cut out all the emissions. It's hard. The key thing you have to do is you have to be smart, and you do have to go to reliable information sources. Like if you want to know about the environment and what's really healthy, you got to do some research, and you have to ask around. Maybe you can spend your time Googling and try to find what's real, but talk to some people that you trust, and they can probably point you to the right things. I mean, if you want to know about nutrition, you go to nutritionfacts.org. That's where you go, or the Two Health Initiative and the information they're putting, or now foodfacts.org is out as well, but nutritionfacts.org. You want to know about the environment and the causes there are tons of environmental organizations, and including plant-based data, that has all the scientific research from all the top accredited universities in the world, consolidated, organized, and everything. But your average meat-eating bro doesn't go there. Go to those sites or anything like that. So the thing is, you got to first tell them, where are you getting your information, and point them at some better places. And if you're confused about where to go, talk to someone who's been in the space, come to events like this, find out where the good information sources are, because there's way more misinformation than good information out there. And it's just a sad truth of the world.
Thank you.
Well, you guys did a great job, good quality resources. So keep it up.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for your question. And
Any other
thank
questions?
you, Jan. Well, we have 2 minutes. So if it can be asked, our climate healers, Danny, will come on and ask, and then you can answer in a minute.
Okay, we have several questions, but let's see what we can squeeze in. One question is, earlier we were talking about how to get Elon Musk to cut the budget by eliminating subsidies to animal ag. Have you any thoughts or means of communicating with Mr. Musk?
Elon Musk, there's some good things and some bad things, about him there. The thing though is that when it comes to appropriations and everything, the meat lobby, the animal agriculture industry is so massively powerful. I dare Elon Musk to take on the animal ag industry. I dare him to get those senators to stop being corrupted. I dare him, or RFK Jr., to try to stop the revolving door with industry into those things. Good luck. I really, I hope, I hope they can put a stop to some of that. I think they're going to be railroaded.
Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
that.
Do we
Yeah.
have time for one more?
I do, but you know,
Okay.
Okay, we've got
Um,
1 minute.
yeah.
okay, you mentioned that food waste is a big issue, and later you said that animal ag is inefficient because feeding animals creates a feed ratio. Isn't
Mhm.
any feed ratio, uh, or can any feed ratio be defined waste once we recognize that meat and dairy are not essential? Thank you.
Okay, a little hard to understand the question, but if I'm understanding correctly, is that if we just use our land to grow food, for us, we only need so much land. If we want to grow food to feed animals that we then consume the animals, we need this much land. The problem is the earth only has so much land, so much habitable land. We can't grow food in the desert. We can't grow it on glaciers. So what we have to do is the habitable land, the arable land on earth, we have to use smart and grow food that we can consume rather than food, and especially monocrops with pollutants and fertilizers and pesticides we're feeding the animals. So it's, you know, earth is beautiful, it's big, but it's finite, it's limited. Wow.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Jan, that was a wonderful presentation. We appreciate all those slides and also the resources that you put at the end. I think this will be very helpful for many people. And
Oh, thank
thank you
you.
for your time.
Hey, thank you for all who are joining or watching the recording. I hope you learned some, and I put my email there at the end. If you do have questions, I welcome them, and I can point you to resources if you wonder where to go for some credible truth on these issues.
Excellent.
So,
All right.
and
Thank you so
can't
much.
wait
And
for the
you,
next session. Yay! So,
great.
okay,
Right,
all
right.
right,
Thank you
okay,
so much, Jan.
okay. Thanks, everyone.